Call meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchak.
Here.
Alderman Bushy is not here. Alderman Meyer.
Here.
Alderman Hancher.
Here.
Alderman Garrell is not here. Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Alderman Schneider.
Here.
Alderman Nervin.
Here.
And Mayor Wood.
Here. We have a quorum. Just as a very brief kind of preview, this agenda that's in front of you is kind of the concept of what, it'll evolve, but what we're going to try for the next couple of months. When I'm gone, the new mayor can decide whether they want to, and the council, whether they want to continue this. But I think that, tonight it eliminated a couple of meetings that were kind of totally perfunctory, and probably could have eliminated one more. And I think that this will give us an opportunity to ask questions of staff that we really don't have another forum to ask questions as a group. Now, the first item, departmental reports, we didn't get the departmental reports this month. Staff is in the process of creating a format and information, but we definitely will have it next month. At that point, it's not that we're going to have a presentation of each of the reports. People will have them. They'll be able to ask questions and figure out kind of where we're at on things. And the idea being that it gives an opportunity to look at, where staff is and have a better understanding of what's going on, which we otherwise don't have a process for that. The next item is resolutions, and both of the resolutions that are put on here are resolutions that I assume are things that aren't going to generate discussion, but if they are, we get a minor discussion here, but if they really require more in-depth discussion, then we'll send them to a committee like usual. But we end up having meetings that last 5 minutes at 5:15 to handle some vote that doesn't seem to make any sense. Then we have the meat of it are the next two sections, discussion of various things that come up that we might otherwise do a committee of the whole for, and then future policy items for discussion, consideration, analysis. If you have a new concept, this would be the time to raise it, to say you'd like it to go to a committee, but also to let staff give some feedback on, okay, we're gonna look at this. We've got 8 items that we're working on in that area already. Where does this go in the pecking order? Because I think one of our problems as a council historically is not really prioritizing which work we want staff to focus on. Instead, we throw them a lot of stuff, expect it all done at the same time, and then are disappointed if it's not, or maybe don't always get the response that we expect. So I think this will be helpful so that we can give direction to staff on where do these new items fall within the pecking order. So we don't have any departmental reports, so we're not going to handle that this month. February, we will see how that goes. The resolutions, Resolution 3909. This is a resolution amending the 2021 to 24 collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Fire and EMS Association in connection with the establishment of the full-time paramedic firefighter position. Does anybody have questions or want a presentation? If not, is there a motion to recommend this to the council?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
The next item is Resolution 3910. This is a resolution approving acceptance of a $20,000 donation from the Thiensville Mequon Rotary Foundation and authorizing the purchase and installation of an ADA accessible fishing pier at Rotary Park. There is an additional total cost. And are there any questions, or is there any presentation required?
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. I see Alderman Strelchak's hand up.
Yeah, this location is typically a site of a youth, the youth early season fishing opportunity. And as you look at the fishing tables, they're gorgeous. You look at the layout, it's gorgeous. But the one thing that they're not really taking into account with this design is the fact that it's a youth fishing area where they're trying to get the DNR's goal It's an it's an urban fishing spot. Their goal is to get young kids who might not always be involved in fishing into the sport and out there trying it. And if you've ever fished with a young kid, their attention span's about 1/10 of an adult, and then they wander off and they want to throw things in the water and they want to plunk in the water, and there's no guardrails on the new one as if there were on the old one. If you look at the photo in the packet, the old one has changed. We talked about this a little before. I'm just kind of bringing it up here and giving the explanation of what I'm seeing. If you look at the photo before, we not only have a barrier going around where a kid couldn't really get through very easily, but then also in the gaps we have chains kind of blocking that off. So I see this as something it's just a really great asset for the city. I think it's a wonderful thing that we should invest in, but I definitely want that design reviewed and maybe gone over a little more thoroughly to address that concern of those kids going under the rails and falling in.
Well, there may be a way, even within the budget, to do something along those lines. There's $3,000 in the budget for sales tax, and we don't pay sales tax, so that needs to get amended anyhow.
Right.
But Mike, do you want to respond to anything?
I can talk to Somerset Marine and just see what the options are.
Sure.
I know they have different rail systems. We were trying to, we obviously, wanted to highlight this as a use as well, but we also wanted to make sure that we had it as ADA compliance. And so we can add, I'm pretty sure we'd be able to add some sort of make sure that.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier than it looks. Yeah.
Anything else? We have a motion and a second to recommend this to the council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And I'd like to thank the foundation for the donation. The next item is, now we're in the discussion portion of the committee of the whole meeting. And this is the sign code amendment. Mr. City Attorney.
All right, so just a very quick recap of where we're at and how we got here. You'll recall the background. I think we've discussed numerous times. I don't know that we need to go back through that again this evening. We then move on to it's really slow tonight, so I may skip the PowerPoint altogether. But you'll recall that we had a proposed ordinance where we talked about the street reserved area. That's area that really the bulk of the signs that we would allow on public property would potentially go. Various rules and restrictions that were related to that were discussed and talked about last time. We then talked about other public property, so our parks, the area around City Hall, those types of things. Talked about the various types of signs that we would allow in those locations as a part of that. We highlighted the fact that so there's some signs, for example, that we just kind of have to have, such as the sign that we talked about here in the parking lot. And then we talked about, again, just some of the additional issues with other property. We then introduced the concept of the free area, being the area where effectively any signs could go. This is one area of change from what we looked at last month. Primarily the areas of change in the versions that you see before you reflect that we've moved it a little bit farther north, a little bit farther away from the Gateway Monument itself. And we also tightened up some of the language in terms of, you'll recall we had 63 square feet as the size of the sign. We measured, Jack actually went out and measured, and it's 27 square feet, so we addressed that. When we look at the free area, and this is not to scale, and I'm a terrible artist, so just forgive that. But this is effectively a reflection of what the maximum signs could potentially be out there. The code says that it has to be at least 5 feet from face to face, and then it's a maximum of 27 square feet in size. So if you do that math, you end up with, if you wanted to squeeze as many possible signs as narrow as they could be, and maximize your 27 square feet, what you end up with is a sign that's effectively 7 feet tall by 3.8 inches wide. or 3.8 feet wide rather. And so if you do that, and then you calculate out the 25 feet width that the depth is, you end up effectively with being able to fit 6 signs across or deep from the road back into the park. And then because you're 5 feet apart and you're 50 feet, you've got 10 possibilities of signs that way. So you could potentially have a maximum of up to 60 signs. The reality is nobody's going to have a 3.8 inch wide sign. And so the reality is that it's going to be much less than that. The other thing to remember is that you only can have one specific sign. So it's not like you're going to say 50 signs that are all the same. They would have to be different and individual signs, which may minimize the number of signs that you're going to see there as well. So,
And they have to come up and take down each.
right, and they have to be taken down each day, and all of those concerns as well. For whatever reason, we're not advancing, and so we'll just do it from my version. The changes that we have since last month, number one, there's just some general cleanup language, both in terms of things that I and other members of staff identified, as well as our legal counsel that we retained from Madison to assist us with us, reviewed it. There's some cleanup language that's there. We did add a few additional signs. For example, we addressed the fact that you could have a sign that is driving down the street, commonly known as a semi-truck that has a big sign on the side as it's going down the road. Those types of things. We also addressed the library sign, which we talked about last month. And then what you have before you is 2 versions, one version with the free area and one version that has no free area. Now, one thing that we did talk about last month, I will admit that I did not reach out to the Junior Women's Club. It was something that I overlooked as part of the discussion. But we did go back and take a look at the actual MOU that exists between the city and the Junior Women's Club who donated the sign. And that MOU, I think, gives us some guidance in terms of what their thoughts might be. Which is that the sign, the MOU says, shall announce the arrival of a special and distinct neighborhood that is the heart of the 2 communities and shall serve to announce community events. It further says that the city shall administer and program the messages displayed on the event sign, consistent with current policies for message display. And then lastly, that it's dedicated to the city for the benefit of public information regarding community events and as one element of the gateway features. The thing that I was struck with after I read the MOU, which was done before my tenure in office, is that it really is designed to be kind of an adjunct to the gateway as a whole. That it was really designed to be, this is the notice of your arrival here in the corridor, as opposed to concerns about the electronic portion of it specifically. It was much more of a broad type analysis and approach. So with that, our next steps here, what we're looking for this evening, you've got the 2 really alternatives that are there. It's a little hard to kind of juggle both of them as we move forward. So looking at perhaps some guidance from the council in terms of which of the 2 alternatives we'd like to consider and look at, the free area or no free area. There are some additional code clarification issues that will need to take place, and so I don't know that we're ready to adopt this evening. For example, those couple added signs that we talked about, as we reread it and look at the language, it's really stuck in a section that it shouldn't be in that section. It should be brought back out into a more general section. There's questions regarding the granting of licenses or permits. And wanting to make sure that that's not overly broad, that we kind of narrow that and clarify that. Some questions about what do we mean by functions of the city, where we talk about that with respect to the sign in the no free area circumstance. Likewise, what does it mean for the city to sponsor an event? Should be something that we look at and talk about. And then lastly, and this is really something that just struck me as I read through the MOU, that where we say city, we should really be identifying the Thiensville events. You know, that if we're putting common council meetings, we should likewise be putting Thiensville Village Board meetings on that sign, because the MOU does talk about both communities as being kind of shared partners in that. And so we'd probably want to address those, to make those types of messages both for the city and Thiensville as well. And then lastly, just to address any other further issues or questions that you folks might have for us this evening. So that's kind of the quick and dirty overview.
Questions? Oh, before we get to the committee, we did have one resident who registered to speak, Cheryl Rebholz, and she opposes the motion, and Cheryl wishes to speak, so if you'd come to the microphone and limit your presentation to 5 minutes, please.
Cheryl Rebholz, 11715 North Bridgewater Drive. I'm addressing, especially in the packet under the ordinance, page number 53, where it does affect me. You're talking about the blue and white ones, what you call wayfinding signs. Now, I'm really disappointed, and this is very unexpected, that you feel that you want to make those obsolete, that you're going to have some of these signs exist. And I have blue and white ones, and I went through a very business and city friendly process to get my signs approved and paid for. The blue and white signs for Bear Arms business out in the rural area on the west side, number one, they're made of reflective material, so the car lights can find those signs. I don't have a lot of lightscaping out there. You also mentioned that GPS has now evolved in cell phones, that we don't need these signs as often. I happen to disagree. I think that's very subjective. If you have GPS, that means you're taking your eyes off your cell phone and you're looking down. And that's a safety issue and a public safety issue. There are certain states that don't let you use your cell phones because of fatalities. I don't want my customers looking down on their GPS to find our signs. Signs are an investment. We're talking about signs because it's an obvious thing that we need them to advertise, to locate where we are. An example would be, I don't think the developers in the city of Mequon, for example, Concord Development, Lakeside, Mickelson, would like it if you would take down their signs. I think all those leasing signs, if you're kind of being subjective here, and I think discriminating, they would oppose taking down their for lease signs all over the city. They're there for a reason, for direction and to draw people to it. The other thing is, I think we should be grandfathered. Ask the people that paid for these signs for a reason. We should be grandfathered in, or if the businesses don't want them, ask them permission and consent. If they don't want them up because they don't think they need them anymore, refund their money, but give them the option and consent. Dialogue again, like we dialogued and went through the legal process to get them put up. So I ask that you table this, go back, have a discussion, or amend it, especially the blue and white reflective ones. That will have an impact. You say they don't have an impact? It will have an impact of customers finding my destination in a safe manner, especially at night, where there are no special lighting in that rural dark area. And we're dark 50% of the year, and we're overcast 50% of the year. So I ask that you bring this back and amend it. And I hope you do it in good faith, because now I feel betrayed. I went through the process, which I said was friendly, invested the money, and now you want to take the process away and take my signage down. I don't think that's a very good reputation for the Common Council and the people that passed it originally. Make us a part of the conversation and consider grandfathering. I think that should be an automatic. People already invested are grandfathered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rebholz. Now to the committee. Alderman Parrish.
I was just hoping the city attorney could answer that question before we go off on everything else about the blue signs. Does the concept of grandfathering exist? Can we phase it out for new signage coming in?
In my opinion, it really doesn't. You're making, and I think you kind of heard the key word in the presentation by Ms. Rebholz, which is it's advertising. It is signs that If you allow for advertising signs for one individual, you need to allow them for other individuals. And, it certainly could be that if the council, would decide that we want to have these types of signs there, we could do that with recognition that everybody then can put those types of signs up and have those. And that, I think, is probably the less preferred alternative. The other thing that I will just mention, and obviously we don't know at this point, but certainly one of the reasons why Ms. Rebholz in particular went through the process to get those signs was issues related to signage on the building itself. And it may be, and as I say, I can't say for sure at this point, but it might be that as we look at the restrictions and how we deal with signage on things like buildings, that's one of those thorny issues that we talked about last month. It may actually end up benefiting her in the sense that she may be able to have additional signage that she's not able to have now. Obviously, we don't know that at this point. I don't have that section drafted, but it certainly is a possibility. And we obviously, even if we would adopt this, this month, which I don't think that we're quite ready to do, we can always come back and change it if we realize that, hey, we've got no real change to signs on buildings, and we need to address some of these concerns. That we can come back and look at modifications at that point as well. So,
Alderman
Schneider.
Snyder, thank you.
I just a quick follow-up to that question. Now that we're on the blue signs, they would be. This is only because they're on public property, correct? So these would be if they were moved back to an area that was on the. I'm assuming her own land. That's totally acceptable. It's just that they're in the right of way, correct? Or
well, I mean, certainly we have code restrictions in terms of what types of signs you can have on your property. That was kind of the building signage that we talked about. The same would be true for standalone signs, monument signs, whatever you want to call them.
So it may not be that simple.
So it's not quite that simple, right?
My other question is, you referenced this a little bit in your discussion, your opening discussion, but can you give us a little more specificity about your thoughts on the content of the sign? If we're not having a free area, the content of the city sign, does it have to be restricted to things that are directly related to city functioning, say a common council meeting? I am imagining that other things like a blood drive is not okay. Or if you could just describe for me the kinds of things that you think would be acceptable from a legal standpoint to put on that sign without a free area.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are certain things that I think very clearly, would be covered. I think, notices of meetings, would be covered. I think that, notices related to city services. So, hey, remember it was, although it doesn't apply here now that I'm thinking about it more, but in some communities where they provide trash for, pickup. Hey, it was a holiday. Remember your trash pickup is, going to be off a day because we didn't have it this week. You need to renew your dog license. Those types of things related to essential functions of government and services that we provide. There are, I think, some areas, and that was really where we talked about some of the fleshing out of the government functions and sponsorship issues that may, a blood drive, for example. A blood drive, I don't know that you're going to get anybody saying, hey, that's overly political or advocacy. On the other hand, if you say we're having a vaccination clinic, now all of a sudden that becomes political. And so it's one of those things that we have to look at a little bit. Likewise, I think there's a difference potentially between, hey, go to the high school for the fall play versus an event that we sponsor, say Gathering on the Green, which is in our parks. That's another issue that we really need to flesh out, I think, a little bit more in terms of
But
what
you're confusing me a little bit on that. because gathering on the green, are you saying that is a city function? I'm assuming it's not a city function.
That's where I think that this is deficient, the way we have it now. And here's the problem that arises. The concept with the free area, which nobody likes, is that everybody has equal time, and you really can't, it's hard to argue that the city is getting something other than equal time. We're assuming, but there is no case that says this, that advertising, but they're putting out on the sign that dog licenses are up for renewal is okay. But that's a step more risk that you have, that you get sued saying you're able to advertise your product, your requirement, but somebody else can't put theirs up. We think the courts will go along with that. That's part of the nature of doing government business. But if you go a step further and you do gathering on the green, which we don't pay for, we don't organize, all we do is let them use our park. I think, why does gathering on the green get to have a signage and Lumen Christie's blood drive doesn't?
And I think that was a poor choice of the events on my part. I was thinking more of.
We need to be really specific and careful
really specific.
about this language.
Right.
Because we will get sued. And if we're going to go with this concept that we get to kind of pick and choose what's up there, because we're supposed to be not
choosing
picking content.
Right.
Now, maybe if we're picking content that says it's just the facts, it's not advocating, it's not saying come to the blood drive, it's just blood drive, time and date, and that's a blood drive that the city is holding, maybe. But the more discretion you allow, the more information you provide, the more you sound like you're advocating for anything, the more likely it is that somebody else says, why can't we advocate on public property? And that's where the draft isn't quite there. And I'll call on people in 1 second. I did want to back up on the blue signs. We're not passing this tonight, I don't think. There'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions, but to back up, if we allow the blue signs to stay, it's quite clear under the existing case law that if we allow some business to advertise in the public right of way, we'd have to allow all business. And we'd have to allow everybody else to advertise whatever their thoughts, beliefs, and what have you are. You can be more restrictive, we think, under the code as far as commercial speech. But that is not even the highest and most recognized part of speech. So if you're going to allow commercial speech in your public spaces, you certainly, I think, end up having to allow all the campaign signs and all the, we hate John Worth signs and whatever else people want to post on public property. And so the problem, we thought we had a system that worked pretty well. It wasn't great, but we got challenged because some people, and when you actually look at the case law, they had a legitimate argument, whether it's good policy or not. It is what the U.S. Supreme Court has said, and we're trying to conform with it. I think Alderman Meyer and then Alderman Strelchak.
First of all, no matter what we do here, we still are open to litigation. And it's just the amount of exposure that we want to put ourselves to, and the amount of restrictions that we want to put on our residents or that, and not willing to take a stand on something. The blue signs, while our guest used the term as advertising, it's actually not advertising, it's a directional sign. And that is why that sign is in place. It's not to advertise the business, it's to show the direction to. And state has that, the highways, those are all over the place for the exits, for directions for it. And I think these fall under the same category as that, as directional signs, not as advertising for it. I think that while I fully agree in allowing us to have advertising signs over at the ballpark, and I feel that's a good thing, why is there a difference in between that? they should still fall under the same category if you're calling them advertising. Should be the same thing, as long as the person is paying for those, and as long as that they go through all rules and regulations on it. Grandfathering in is fine inside there, but I think the having it so the fact of that they go through the same process that we are setting up for the ballpark to have advertising there and that is the same thing that we would set up for directional signs.
So are we going to have, I mean, how many of them do you want to allow?
Well, you know, it depends upon, we can have limitations on the height that they can be at and the lower level they can be at, and if there's a distance, if there's room in between over there for 3 signs. Maybe there's room for 3 signs inside.
So everywhere there's room for signs, we're going to allow them.
I don't think you're going to have, you know, it's the same thing as that. I don't think you're going to have every business looking for that. Every business
Correct.
doesn't need to have that. But if you have it as a business directional sign, you know, I don't think you're going to have a proliferation of the same thing as you think. I don't think there's going to be a proliferation of signs over in the free area. There may be, there may not be, you know, in that. But choking off some of the things that we do for the sake of maybe, possibly, might do some kind of litigation over at some kind of future date. Sometimes we have to take a little step forward, or sometimes we have to take a little chance, and for the residents or for the businesses that are here.
Well, but there's a difference between chance and knowing your ordinance is illegal.
Well,
And right now, we know that we can't give preference to directional signs over other types of signs that somebody may want to put there. We can't choose, because it's a directional sign, that's okay.
what
In
does
fact,
it
there's
say?
a very
What-
specific
where's
case that
the-
says
Where
that.
does it say that?
Oh, I'll show you
You can
the
see about
case.
advertising, I know that, but not over.
No, there's a
directional.
specific case that talks about you can't give preference to directional signage over other signage.
Right.
And you can't have different rules for directional signage than other signage. So we would have to simply say, we will allow X number of signs in the city, blue signs, and we will rent them on a first come, first served basis. And people can put whatever they want on those signs, and hope that people don't put things that we find objectionable on those signs.
Well, it'd have to be, you can put it down there just for business directional.
No, you can't. That's the
Well-
point. That's what the court has specifically said, is you can't.
Allowing
Choose
anybody to do that. Allowing anybody to put down business directional.
No, it's allowing anybody to do whatever they want on the sign. The business directional is
Then
one
you-
of the very
then you restrict
specific things that the Supreme Court said you can't say business directional signs get these privileges and other business signs get other. That's what the case said. It's, if you're going to allow the sign, people can put whatever they want on their sign. You can't make it for
Then
business
restrict
directional.
the area on the sign, then restrict the area that you can put it in. Allow with signs, whatever, but restrict the area that's gonna be on that. So that maybe
That we could
limits
do.
it
We
down
could
to
say,
2 per.
we could say that we will allow these signs in these locations around the city. We can't pick and choose winners. It can't be because we want this particular business to get it and this particular business not to. And we'll allow signs of this size, and they're available. And that, I think you could, Brian,
And you could have it that everyone has to be blue and white.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the issue that you have with that approach is the same issue that everybody's concerned about with the free area, is that while we can say you can have a sign in this location, it can be, 6 square feet, it has to be blue and white. At the end of the day, we can't make a distinction between business this way with an arrow versus, vote.
Made America.
Right.
And that's where.
Well,
And if we want to do that, that's.
depends upon how many people want to pay the fee to do that.
Right.
To pay the sign, pay the fee, and to do all that.
Right. But we need to build it into an
I
ordinance, so
don't
we
think
need to
you're
make some
gonna have a lot
decisions
of
if we're going to
people
do that.
but-
Can I just add another comment or just some history from
Sure.
the city? Thank you. When I went through I cannot have another sign on my property. My Alderman Dale Mayer and I went through the process, creating a special ordinance so that my outside sign would be in compliance. It wasn't just for Bear Arms. We wrote it in such a way that the community at large could also do it after me. So for me to have another sign on a private property is not my goal. I have one. And we went through the process legally through the city and through public welfare to achieve that. The blue and white signs, I don't, like you said in your packet, I don't know how popular they are. I don't think they are. And it was a very tight ordinance what I could do when I applied to Public Works. And I conformed with those rules and restrictions. It
But we
was
no longer
fine.
going to have those tight ordinances. That's what needs to get across to people.
But at
All
the
of our
time,
ordinances are going to get
they
changed.
were, I complied.
Right.
I paid for 3 of them. It's no difference in the I-45 signage, which I'm on. It's a first come, first serve. They're very tight, what you can put on there, dimensions, artwork, and it's first come, first serve, renewable. So I don't know how popular it is. I think I'm very unique in wanting it because of my business. It's not common. And it is a directional because that was the counsel I was given. It's serving a couple purposes to meet the goal, and it was entered into in good faith, complied, paid for, and I don't know, I think we're making more out of this than it is, and over-regulating and overthinking this. So I'm just throwing back the process that we did go through to get to where we are, and there's,
We
it's been
understand, but
fine.
we do have a limit here on how much time we have in this meeting.
Just real quickly, Mr. Mayor, the other thing I just wanted to add with respect to that specific concern is, I'm not, based on what I understand the program to be, those freeway signs, I'm not sure that those meet constitutional muster either. And the state quite likely could be sued and probably lose based as to how they structure their program in terms of some of the things that they do. They're very stringent in terms of message and artwork and who can be there and that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure that that meets constitutional muster as we currently understand it. So,
Alderman Strelchuk?
I'm on the same page as Alderman Meyer. I worked at Villa Park far too long ago, when it was still Villa Park. In fact, I still refer to it as Villa Park versus River Club. And I know when the signs went into the neighborhood, the neighbors were pleased that the signs went in because cars weren't driving through the neighborhood trying to find, one place versus another. If they're coming from a wedding, going to a reception, and they've stopped out for dinner, maybe had a couple drinks, they're not driving through the neighborhood and trying to find something. I don't understand how we can have a street that says Bonniewell Court on it, but we can't have a sign that says River Club, Bear Arms, some of these specifically neighborhood businesses that you just simply can't and won't find in general by driving by. You're going to drive down a wrong street. You're going to go on a residential street. I mean, it makes no sense to me. So I guess I'd like to see, when we pull this back forward, if the highway signs don't meet the muster, I just want to see the wording and the language on it, for the next meeting for sure. Otherwise, we're discussing the same things without seeing any actual writing, because I disagree. It's a wayfinding sign. Miss Rebholz, with that sign, you should be able to find that business. She's way out far in the community, and if you didn't know exactly where it was from being there at least once before, you might have a difficulty finding it. The city sign, and then kind of segueing over, because I'm trying to only take one opportunity to chat here. The city sign with the city messaging, I don't understand why we can't say city-sponsored events. We give Gathering on the Green discounts. We're sponsoring in that sense on what our usual rental would be. We're sponsoring that event as a community event, a community building event. We're sponsoring a blood drive. We're sponsoring a COVID clinic. Whether it's political or not, made by some people because of their opinions, is beside the point. The city is sponsoring that event. If it's overly political, maybe the city should or shouldn't sponsor it. But still,
It has nothing to do with whether it's political. That isn't even an issue here.
Okay. But why as a city community can't we post the happenings of city events on a city assigned as it relates to city business and just have real strict guidelines as to what it is moving forward.
I think we need to have more of a discussion. We have 5 minutes before, and we've got
Right.
people here who are coming for other items on the agenda. This is on our common council agenda a little bit later. We can resume as a committee of the whole when we get to that point, if people be willing to do that. But I think there are people here for example, the water utility that are coming to, and that's why some people walked in. So I think it's important that let's kind of stay on task and then come back to this. So do we have a motion to table this item?
Move to table this item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table. All in favor of tabling this item, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The next item on the agenda, and we don't have much time for it, so we're not going to take much time for it. In fact, maybe we, unless if there's a lot of discussion, maybe we table this also. But it would be the potential renewal of the city's membership in the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. I emailed a memo to everyone as well as distributing it. I don't know what people, if we can have a quick discuss. Do people have strong feelings about this one way or another? Let's start with that. Alderman Hancher.
I think we should join. Simple as that.
Alderman Giro.
Didn't we discuss this last year and there was a reason why we didn't join?
No, I brought it up and we just didn't get to it during budget. I don't believe we ever had a substantive discussion. Alderman Schneider.
I just had a question because you referenced at the very end of your discussion on this that you were the person that had advocated initially not joining, and I'm wondering what you thought then and what has changed now, because it does sound like a good idea to me, but I'm wondering what you thought was not a good idea.
Well, I don't like the fact that it does some lobbying. Now, there's some lobbying that probably every community agrees with. There are some positions that some communities agree with and some communities don't. My general belief was that, we shouldn't be using tax money for lobbying. But the problem is what's ended up happening, that lobbying's happening anyhow, and we don't even have a seat at the table to tell them that we disagree. And I think that over the course of time, and particularly as alderman, I've seen an awful lot of opportunities where we could have gotten information. Either we didn't get it, or we got it circuitously and probably in a way that wasn't totally above board from people who are members, and we effectively took their property. We're the only community in the state that isn't a member. It's not a big cost. And I think we ought to try. And then, as Alderman Pushy put it in an email to me, we assess our return on investment. The first year's investment would be zero, or even the second year with a $11,000, which ends up being $5,500 a year, and make a determination: are we getting enough bang for our buck? But I think you would. And frankly, I wanted to bring this up now to right a wrong I think I committed. Well, I still can. Alderman, my head is still fuzzy from being sick. I'm sorry. Nerban. I've only known you for 10 years.
Give or take. I was going to recommend jumping back in. I think if we really tried hard to leverage some of the training that's available, we might be able to offset costs elsewhere. If we really look for those opportunities, and to your point, some of the information gathering, either you go backdoor or you end up spending a lot of your own staff's time to get it the hard way when it could be served up for you. So I think we might be able to find areas to offset elsewhere in the budget. But we should probably track it as we go and see where we save it. Now that we're looking for it and quantifying it, it's quite possible it will pay off. But I agree with Alderman Bushy. We should monitor for the next. I'm assuming if we commit, we'll actually pay the next year like we're agreeing to, and not.
It's not a firm commitment, but it may be kind of
it's kind of a gentleman's agreement. Yeah, and we can just see where the data points is.
I saw somebody's hand over here, Alderman Meyer.
I think it's long overdue to get back into it. I just want to make sure that everybody's well aware of the fact that, I'm considering it more than just a one-year commitment on this. I'm considering this is going to be minimum of 2, but probably a lot more than that. Once we see the benefit of it during these next 2 years coming up, because although it is free the first year, it wouldn't be right for us to take the freebie and go on. And besides that, one of our former employees, I think, is going to be the president next year of the league, so we might have a sympathetic ear for it, so.
Is this something that we would actually need a resolution at the council, or is this something that falls within budget parameters, and if the committee recommended it to staff could join?
Well, this year is free, so.
Well, I know, we still gotta apply.
Well, I'll speak from the administrative side of things. Pending consensus here tonight, we would get the application going post haste and then include this in the proposed budget for 2023, at which time the council would then have another bite at the apple to affirm their decision here tonight.
Okay.
We have a motion.
I move to move forward with joining the League of Wisconsin Municipalities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That will end our, just one last thing in the future. And in the future, we'll probably make these hour meetings, but the next few months rather than 45 minutes. And the next spot would be an opportunity if you've got some idea that you want to create a committee, initiate some sort of legislation, whatever. You bring it up here and we can then make sure that it gets the priority that it's due. Unless, of course, we find out that, nobody else thinks there's merit, and then maybe that's a message to staff also. Alderman, or excuse me, Mr. City Attorney.
Just for the purposes of highlighting that, I'm going to send out an email or a memo to all of you just about how, from an open meetings perspective, we should deal with that particular section. So just keep an eye out for that.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning the committee of the whole, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. The next